Hello, this is a review of a comic book, the most contentious comic book ever made. Isom, a black man dared to create a story about a black man superhero. Is it terrible? Is it amazing? Let's find out. To give a brief overview of why I'm even talking about this, I have never owned a comic book in my entire life. In fact, Isom 1 and 2 are the first two comic books I think I've ever held in my hands. My mom has read the Walking Dead comic books, and those are the only comic books I think I've ever seen in person. I have no interest in comic books. I've never read any comic books. However, I think that to fully invite myself into this controversy about if Isom is the worst comic book ever created, it requires actually reading it. And since I know comic books are meant to be held in your hand, I figured, hey, I'll go out and I will actually buy a copy of this, which I've done. There are many fat retards on the internet who are very upset about this comic book. I guess they assume that the success it has is undeserved. They've each made, I think, millions of dollars each. They've sold thousands of copies. And I guess there's some issues. So I will talk about both the things I like and the things I do not like. I've read Isom 1 so far. I will read Isom 2 later, and I will also review that. If you're somebody who is somehow found this video and you have no idea who I am, you will probably hate this review. Enjoy. One legitimate complaint I have right off the bat that doesn't really make sense until after you've read the comic. This cover is a complete misrepresentation of the contents of this comic. There is no fight scene between the people in green suits and the Isom man, the main character, Avery. He is in his suit and he is engaging. I think they're called the Alpha Corps. Pretty sure that's their name. The Alpha Corps don't really do anything in this first edition, and Avery doesn't get his suit until the actual last page. Spoiler alert. So the comic book cover that I have, which I think is cover C as it's advertised, is a complete lie. And that's kind of a big deal because I think my main complaint about the comic book is that it's a superhero story, and it really shouldn't be. This is the first page that you see when you open the comic. I figure I should talk about the art a little bit. The art seems fine to me. Apparently some people disagree with this. I don't have any complaints about how it looks. I think that the comic style is well done. I would say there is something strange about, very specifically, white faces. There's something like a little bit off-putting about them. I want to say they look a little bit like too soft or something. It's really strange. I don't even know how to describe it. But besides that, it's a really nice style. Some people complain about the colors. I don't have any issue with it. I think that they were going for that, and it's whatever it is. This is the dedication. The dedication to me was this is a really weird thing to complain about, but it was the first thing that I read, so it kind of stuck with me, even to the point where I've finished it. I've read it twice now, and it really sticks out to me. Just the way that the dedication is written is really strange and kind of awkward. I'll read it. Eric says, "I'd like to thank every single supporter, fan, and colleague that has helped make my many dreams come true, but this comic book venture is easily the most adventurous or ambitious project that I've ever had the blessing of committing to." I'm not sure but it really it really bothers me. I like to thank everybody, but this project is really awesome, and I guess I did it. I would like to thank myself. That's how it comes across. Yeah, I like to thank my supporters, but I'd also like to point out that this was a lot of work, and I did it. That was really weird, and I resolved to make fun of it. So it starts off really weak, and I don't mean to be too negative right off the gate, but I still, even in retrospect, I don't fully understand what this intro sequence has to do with the story. It's basically the cops are talking amongst themselves about how the crime rate's going down because of superheroes. The police chief seems to get upset and yells at the cops for what they're saying. I really don't understand how this ties in. It doesn't really make any sense to me. Maybe I'm just retarded. I do accept that as a possibility. But it doesn't really have anything to do with Avery. It doesn't really have anything to do with what's happening in the story. It just seems like police chief trope from comic book movies. It kind of reminds me of the police chief in Spider-Man or something. It just seems out of place and doesn't really connect. So the main plot is actually that Avery has this black woman friend who lives in the city. Avery lives out in the country, and he seems to want to live a quiet life. However, this woman has called him to say that someone he knows, Jasmine, a young woman, has gone missing, and they have reason to believe that she is in danger. So despite wanting to live out in the country, he decides to go back into the city to find out what happened to Jasmine, because she's friends of family or something like that. People have complained that a ex-superhero going back into the business is sort of an unusual plot for a comic book. Did not stand out to me as something stupid. It kind of hints that there's more going on that you can learn about, and I found that okay. Everything regarding Jasmine and that plot is fine to me. So kind of apropos of nothing, it cuts to a fight scene between the Alpha Core guys in the green suits that are on the cover, and a woman named Yera, who is like a blonde chick in spandex. I don't know what this really sets up. It's sort of weird. There's like a couple, like there's ABC plots in the very first part of the book, which is really confusing because I don't know anything about Isom and I don't know anything about the universe. But it cuts to police. First segment in the book is police are complaining about crime and stuff, and then this girl's missing, and then also plot C. Yera, a lady in spandex I've never seen before, is fighting the Alpha Core, who I don't know anything about. And it's like a lot happening right at the beginning, and it loses me almost immediately. But each of these segments is like so short that it wasn't really like insurmountable. I just didn't understand why there was ABC, to open the book with. But you can see it cuts right there from like the confrontation between like the superhero people, and then Avery just kind of going to his old friend's like club to ask questions about Jasmine, and that sets off the actual confrontation that matters to the main character. So Avery meets a guy called Darren who runs the club but is also sort of like a criminal entrepreneur. He runs what he calls an empire. Darren and Avery are apparently high school friends that have known each other for years at this point. But despite that, and despite Avery having a superhero background, apparently, Darren fucking hates him for no explained reason. The explanation is kind of weak. Darren just says that he's a fucking loser and he's always hated him. Darren basically tells him to get lost and brings out this really big black guy called an Accept, which I think is a really stupid name. Accept is apparently what they call, like, it's kind of like the word mutant in the X-Men comics, I guess, where it's like anyone who's special is called Accept, which is, I assume, short for exceptional. But the word accept is like a real word in the English language, and it's used a lot. So kind of borrowing that for a descriptor is kind of, I don't like that. I don't like that. Anyways, the black guy beats the fuck out of him. And very coincidentally, he gets his ass thrown out of the club, and he literally collides with the Yera chick. And Yera is like, wait, are you an Alpha Core undercover cop, like an undercover superhero, Accept? And she's like, I don't trust you. So she throws him into a car and flies away. Apparently he cannot fly, and apparently him not being able to fly is a meme, because he should be able to fly because all the other Accepts can fly or some shit. But literally the only tie-in between that fight with the Alpha Core and Yera is just to have him crash into her. It really doesn't make any sense to me. So this is the page that shows that he's crashed into the car. However, you might be forgiven for missing the fact that that's a really cool frame of him crashing into a car, because on the other page is the worst thing about this entire book, and I don't understand how I didn't, like, if people were complaining about this, it was completely drowned out with all the other bullshit they were complaining about, because this is a legitimate grievance. And what's worse is that it's an advertisement. It's an advertisement for what appears to be an independent fashion line called Dream State. And like I fully hold in absolute contempt any form of advertising in a paid for product. I paid like the price of this book was a thing in contention. The comic book that Eric July is selling is a higher price than most comic books. So it's sort of like, oh, how does he have the audacity to break into the scene as an independent comic book publisher, publish his first comic, and then ask for more than DC and Marvel are asking for comics or something like that. That was a thing that people complained about. I understand that inflation is a thing and that things cost more now than they used to, especially if you're doing things at a small, economy of scale. So I understand charging more for a comic book, and I don't fault him for that. I do absolutely fault him for putting a full page advertisement in the dead center of a comic book, sort of as like a chapter divider, especially if you're going to ask for more money than a standard comic book goes for. And I don't know if it's better or worse that this is apparently the Etsy store that's owned by Eric July's wife. I kind of understand, shilling for your wife's business, but number one, it should not be in the middle of the comic. It should be at the end, because there's lots of self-promotion that he does for other spin-offs that he's planning at the end of the book, and that's fine. I have no issue with that. However, I think it's sort of worse that it's his wife, but he doesn't say it's his wife. You know what I mean? Like, if he wants to do an ad for her and say, like, look, by the way, if you want to check out my wife's business, here's her fashion line. That's one thing. And because when I saw this, I literally thought it was just some random clothing line, and I was really angry. I was actually genuinely upset when I saw this, and it really soured the entire thing for me, because it's like, I paid for your fucking book. I actually went through a lot of trouble to get this book into my hands, and I really didn't expect to see an advertisement while reading it. So randomly, after the car crash scene, after I turn the page from the ad, the other side of the ad is this non sequitur. Again, we're back into the country. It even says back in the country, and it doesn't really indicate if time has passed or what's happened. So this is like a flashback, I think that it's meant to be implied, because he's being hospitalized in the chronological timeline of the book. And during that timeline, he goes back to thinking about, I guess, just what country life is like. It's a sort of weird thing about how people in the cities don't appreciate where their food comes from. It doesn't really seem to have a tie-in with the plot. I'm not sure what it's setting up, and I think that the chronological sequencing, how the book is pieced together, the flipping back and forth between different plots and flashbacks and so on and so forth. That is one of the major detriments of the storytelling, is that it really does change gears really quickly and go to completely different places without really explaining why. It makes it difficult to keep track of on your first read. So then Avery escapes the hospital and is immediately hit on by a skimpy crack hoe. I believe that's what's happening in that comic. And this is one of the biggest WTFs of the entire story, is that he just got his ass kicked. This except from the club just smashed him into, literally punched him upwards into the sky, so accurately and precisely he crashed into a superwoman, who then held him by his neck and threw him into a car, and then they hospitalized him, and now he just immediately walks back to the club. And it's literally the same day. They explain, this isn't my interpretation of the time. He walks from Alliance Medical Northwest, as it says there, back to the club that Darren owns to look for Jasmine again, because he now believes that she's there. Well, sure enough, Jasmine is there. He finds her at the club. However, while talking to her, before he can get a clear answer of if she's there voluntarily or held against her will or being sex trafficked or whatever, he is intercepted by Darren's goons, who recognize him as the troublemaker from before. So they call in the Except to lay down the second beatdown of the day, and this leads to a really nice, flashy hero shot of them engaging in a fight. However, I posted this as a high point. I enjoy the animations here. The fight is actually well illustrated. I thought that was very flashy and pleasing to the eyes. But somebody pointed out that in this in particular, you can kind of see that on the left, it is a very stylized, emphasized thing that's not, I guess, not supposed to be taken literally, because immediately afterwards they're running back at each other. So there's sort of like a gap in the action. They're literally about to punch each other in the face, and then they're skirting backwards as if they bumped into each other and then just kind of like awkwardly flew backwards onto their feet. When that was pointed out to me, that was a bit weird. I did not notice that on my first or even my second read through. I only noticed that because someone pointed it out to me. So that could just be my non-comic book brain watching this. It did not bother me on my read through. However, I can see the artistic critique that that shot doesn't make sense in retrospect. However, this scene does include one of the best examples of stilted dialogue in the comic. He meets the Accept outside the fight, and this guy, who is like 7 feet tall, 300 pounds, pure muscle, decides to engage him in conversation before they fight. And this is what he says. I told them we should have ensured your defeat, but even I didn't think you'd be dumb enough to come right back. This is why you heroes often end up dead. And then Avery replies saying, I'm no one's hero. I came to your shot collar with respect and was met with disrespect. That cannot be tolerated. I have a sneaking suspicion that if they actually were going to fight in real life, their pre-fight confrontation would sound more like this.
Watch where you walking, nigga. Hey, what you say, nigga?
So spoiler alert, this time around, Avery does win against the Accept. And as he goes to try and find Jasmine, the police randomly show up and interrupt the fight. And because he doesn't want to like kill the police, I guess, he immediately tries to run away. And this is something that I definitely feel doesn't make sense. Like, the cops are right there with their guns pointed at him. And in the next few pages, he basically just skedaddles away, climbs up some scaffolding, and leaves the police, scratching their heads thinking what happened. But he's literally right there and they have their guns out. So I don't know how he got away, and I don't understand why the police are intervening. Like, there's a point made early in the comic book that the police don't like dealing with the weirdos, the superheroes, so that they're intervening in a fight between two Accepts, where obviously they could easily be killed, is a bit strange. And it only exists to stop Avery from finding Jasmine then and there, because he just found her, he walked up to her, he engaged her in conversation, and then immediately put on God mode and beat up the guy he couldn't beat up before. So nothing realistically should stop him from just going into the club and being like, hey Jasmine, let's get out of here, I just kicked that guy's ass. But for some reason the police show up to interrupt the fight, and I guess instead of like engaging with them or whatever, he just decides to run away. Again, maybe I think maybe I'm missing something. Like there's like a tie-in, like the cop scene in the front. Maybe they're crooked or something. I don't know. When I read this, it just seems like the black guy is just saying, "I can't talk to police. I gotta get out of here," and he just leaves. And I don't know. I really feel like that. Logically speaking, there should be some way to resolve this issue immediately, then and there. So then there's a scene where Darren gets together his goons for what I call an evil meeting. He has assembled his goons to discuss what it means to be an empire, what it means to hold power, and what it means to be disrespected. The theme of disrespect is a very common occurrence. It's brought up repeatedly in the very first book that I've read. And that's very much in line with Eric July's ethos. Like when he talks about internet drama stuff, the topic of respect comes up a lot. So I think that respect is something that he orientates his worldview around quite a bit, and it shows up if he's writing this. It's like respect is something that is a serious commodity that is very important. And in this, he's saying that Avery coming in to his turf and beating up his Accept is a serious problem, because that lack of respect and that sign of weakness means that smaller organizations will then swiftly move in and take up his empire and break it down. And when I read this, because this is actually split right down the middle, the left hand is him explaining this. And then I immediately think, well, I'm listening to his evil meeting speech. Why not just give Avery this girl? as far as I'm aware, as far as the story has told me, Jasmine is unimportant. She is literally just a woman, and I believe that her only value to his evil enterprise is as a sexual commodity to be bought and sold. So, if she's just an asset in that sense, surely the most prudent way of dispatching him is to just give him Jasmine. She's not worth that much to them, and it doesn't seem like Avery is on a moral crusade to destroy this evil enterprise. He's only there to get Jasmine. He doesn't even want to be there. He wants to be out in the country farming pigs or whatever. So just give him Jasmine. Wipe your hands of this matter. Say, whoops, we pissed off, the wrong guy by stealing this woman that he's friends with, and he just wants to leave, and we want him to leave. This seems like the most immediate way of resolving this problem. However, in the very next panel, they definitely thought of that, because then the topic is brought up, and he also clarifies that if they give Jasmine to him, then that would also be a sign of weakness, and all the smaller gangs would intrude, as if he had just walked in and taken her by force. Giving her up voluntarily would also be a sign of weakness, and that doesn't make sense to me, because Avery is not trying to be without tact. His very first instinct was, hey, I know this guy. I know Darren from high school. Or Daryl, or whatever his name is. I'm going to go to his evil enterprise and be like, knock, knock. Hey, it's me. I know you from high school. You have one of my friends' daughters in your sex trafficking ring. I would like her back, pretty please, with sugar on top. And his immediate reaction to that is, nah, fuck that. So, that's weird. That's really weird to me, and I don't understand why Jasmine is important to them. Apparently, realizing that he's up against something much more sinister and larger than he expected, he decides to randomly show up at like a military base or scientific underground laboratory and suit up with his old super suit that he had put away and never expected to wear again. And there's the famous Eric July final panel that is just a picture of him, Eric July himself, self-inserted, saying, "We aren't done quite yet." And then there's a little weird thing. It's like a Nordic like heavy metal group that's like in the canon of the franchise, and it's called Norfica because it's like a Nordic African that's like half Nordic and half African. So it's called Norfica. And then there's some teasers for other comics that they want to put out. And that's how it ends. So, all in all, I would say it's pretty unremarkable. It's not bad. I would give it a 5 out of 10, just because I feel like this... What it comes across to me is that Eric July is a guy who really loves comic books, and he loves superheroes. So, as an adult, he's like, I want to become a comic book guy because I don't like modern comic books. So you can see that even to me, it feels like there's a lot of tropes of like really well established comic book tropes that are sprinkled into this, and he just wants to write his story in the exact same way that he knows comic books to be written. And it's centered around this urbanite story of sex trafficking. And to me, the plot about Jasmine is interesting. Like, I'm curious to know how that resolves. However, all the superhero shit is like a needless aside. Like the stuff about Yaira doesn't make any sense. If it was just like a story of this guy trying to figure out what happened to this girl, and the police aren't helping because they're overburdened, overstretched, underfunded, and it falls on him to personally figure out what's happened, I feel like that would be a much more compelling story, and a lot easier. Because when you take on this whole universe of like superhero stuff, you have to establish a lot, like, and it's a lot for an amateur comic book creator to do on his first attempt, and it really feels like that. Like he's trying to do all his favorite things about comic books in his first go, on his first swing, in his first book, and it's like you really probably should have just focused on making a comic book with a real story that didn't have all the supernatural stuff, and just really nail that really well, and that really would have been a convincing, compelling story. So I think that his reach exceeded his grasp, but nothing about this is so offensive to warrant the hate that it gets. And the hate definitely amplifies the success of the comic book. So if I were a guy, and for whatever reason, I really, really hated Eric July, and I wanted him to be bankrupt and destitute, I would not spend months and months and months promoting his comic book indirectly until other people are forced to physically acquire copies of it legally by paying for them just to see if it's actually worth the hate. Because that is a terrible way to bring disaster to somebody's business when you really hate them. If I was somebody who really hated Eric July and I wanted him destitute, and I had spent literally a fucking year screaming about how terrible his comic books are, I would feel like a fucking moron. Because there's literally nothing in this that's like, oh, this to warrant that kind of obsession. It's just some guy's first attempt at a comic book, and it shows. It's average and unremarkable. All right, that's everything. I'll probably do a review of the second one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing to Gumroad. If you're a subscriber to the Gumroad, I will see you next time. Bye bye.